Good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. We're so excited to have a conversation around how to harness emotional intelligence to grow and lead your teams. I'm Morgan Chaney. I run our marketing team at Blueboard, and I'm dialing in from sunny San Francisco. We're having beautiful weather today, knock on wood. We hope that all of you and your families, your coworkers are well and healthy, and we're so excited to have you online with us today. So we're going to get started in just a few minutes, but wanted to set the stage a little bit. We're here because in our current world, we're building relationships ultimately two-dimensionally now at work. We're missing those body cues. We're missing that physical touch, the ability to high five someone if they close a sales deal or to hug them if they're going through loss. And it becomes that much easier for employees in this two-dimensional world, a video to just say that everything's fine. So as a manager and people leader, we're so excited to use this next hour with you to discuss how you can support your team during these trying times by harnessing the power of emotional intelligence. We'd love to hear from you. Please let us know to help get the conversation started, a few things, and you'll see on the chat a few of these prompts coming through. Let us know, what insight or feeling you're hoping to gain out of the conversation today. Let us know why you're here, where you're dialing in from. We'd love to hear from you. And we do this because we're going to be really lively on chat over the next hour. We'd love for you to share your insight, to share your thoughts with us over chat. And you can do that by finding the chat bar along the black Zoom tool on the lower panel here. So feel free to click on chat. Again, keep sharing where you're dialing in from, what you're hoping to gain today. And we'll be getting started in just a few minutes. Thank you for everyone who's dialing in. We're seeing people from Canada, Kentucky, all over the country. Thanks so much for being here. And another option too, just to point out, as you have conversation along the way, you can toggle between sharing with just the panelists, which would just come to this group on screen, or with all panelists and attendees. That really helps your voice be heard. It helps other attendees see what you're thinking. So we encourage you to choose all panelists and attendees when you're making those discussions throughout the content. Before we dive in, I wanted to quickly introduce some of the partners that helped bring all of us together today. We have, I think, nearly 1,500 people who might be live, which is an amazing group. First, I'll introduce Blueboard, the company that I'm with. We're a recognition platform that empowers companies to reward their top people through experiences that are most meaningful now. Maybe that's mindful leadership coaching. Maybe that's building a greenhouse in your backyard or getting on a Peloton for the first time, or helping them to look forward for those experiences for tomorrow. Maybe doing a bucket list trip to Machu Picchu, learning how to kite surf, or getting a much needed massage when we can return to those services. So if recognition is top of mind for you, we're gonna actually launch a quick poll and let you have the ability to reach out to our sponsors along the way. So you'll see that pop up on screen. Feel free to select Blueboard if recognition's on your mind and you're looking for better ways to bring recognition to the forefront to connect managers and their employees. Next up, we have partners from Donut. Donut is a Slack tool for remote-friendly teams. It helps build trust and community and relationships. We actually use Donut at Blueboard to connect our teams weekly while we're working remotely. It's been an amazing tool for us. So if you're looking for those tools to help build trust, to build collaboration across your organization, please check that you'd like to hear from Donut after this meeting. And then last but not least, ThinkHuman is our container for today. They are a leadership development and manager training company that helps support leaders at all levels, really helping to drive lasting behavioral change and habit formations, not just with yourselves, but also with the teams that you're working with. I've actually been training with ThinkHuman for the last year, and it's made a significant impact on my career as a manager. So very thankful for that opportunity. So if you'd like to learn more about equipping your managers to do their best work and training programs, feel free to check ThinkHuman. Again, by checking the poll here, just means that we can send you some information after the event and share a little bit more about the companies that are part of this partnership. And you can absolutely check more than one. So now that the housekeeping is out of the way, I'm going to pass it over to Meredith. She's our CEO at ThinkHuman, and she'll be leading our discussion from here. Welcome, Meredith, and feel free to take it away.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Morgan, and to everybody that is here today from South Africa to California to Lebanon to Chicago and Boston and more. We are so happy to have you in this conversation. And as Morgan said, please get involved in this conversation. This is not TV. We count on your questions and contributions in the chat. So over the next hour, we have this incredible panel of experts that are here to share their road-tested experience, their stories about building emotionally intelligent and resilient organizations. And they're going to be taking your questions. So get involved in the conversation. And as a starting point for a tidbit of context, we just have to start with that more than ever in our generation, organizations are needing to be able to adapt in this ever changing and sometimes very challenging environment. And the World Economic Forum named emotional intelligence one of the most critical skills for 2020. And luckily we have this incredible panel here to be taking your questions. So let me introduce this awesome panel that we have here. Panelists, if you would wave when I do that. Latoya Lynn, Senior HRBP at Compass. Lynette Barksdale. Lynette, Vice President of Diversity and Inclusion at Goldman Sachs. Kevin Yip, COO and co-founder of our partner Blueboard. And Molly West Duffy, Head of Organizational Development at Rally. So let's start broadly. And let's just start with definitions. What do we mean when we refer to EQ or emotional intelligence? And Latoya, if you would, let's start with you.
Yeah, I'll keep it really like just, casual or loose in the sense of emotional intelligence. It's really like ability or that skill set to really connect with someone on a human level and be able to understand and have that awareness on how they're responding to a particular situation or environment, and be able to see that, process or challenge or issue, within that frame. So that's kind of like the basic core level of what I think emotional intelligence is.
Awesome. Lynette, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I would just say the root of emotional intelligence is being aware of your own emotions as well, right? It's very hard and challenging to understand and be able to reconcile others' emotions if you're not aware, acutely aware of your own emotions and what those mean, how they show up for other people. So I would say that foundation, along with what Latoya added, which I think is, right to the point of what it is, I think those things help drive an emotionally intelligent leader.
Yeah. Molly? Anything you'd add?
Yeah, I would add that I think emotional intelligence is really important and the first step, but we do need to go even beyond that to something that I call emotional fluency, which is once you have identified your emotions and others' emotions, being able to understand when you should share those emotions, communicate about those emotions, and when not to, especially within a workplace context.
So good. So if I break this into broad categories, I don't know if you all will think of it the same way, but to me, I hear really self and other. And in the domain of self, like our self-awareness, our ability to self-regulate, know what and how to share. And then as it relates to other, having awareness about our impact on others, social awareness, social sensitivity, like what is actually happening, and then empathy. And in that self and other category, Kevin, I'll direct this next question to you. From your point of view, why is this all important? Why is this meaningful in business?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, right, like businesses, organizations are a collection of people, right? And people are incredibly complex, right? Not only yourself and how you are aware of what triggers you, what, releases you emotionally, but also, right, how that dynamic kind of interacts with others. And so, at least, I think right now, what I'm kind of challenged with at Blueboard is not being kind of in person and not knowing, kind of being able to kind of see body language as well, to know how people are checking in. And so, I think the emotional intelligence piece, especially now, it has to be more direct and upfront and open, so you can kind of understand where people are, if that makes sense. Yeah.
So good. Anybody else wants to add about the
I mean, I'll
impact?
jump in. Yeah, Meredith, I'll jump in and just share that, I think right now, especially, and again, I have always been an advocate for, ensuring that leaders have this training and premise around emotional intelligence. But I think right now, more than ever, it's more imperative. I think as companies are continuing to think about productivity, as we're continuing to think about people in kind of this, as Kevin put it, this complexity that we are currently in, I think it's more important than ever to understand not only your own emotions as a leader, but then how do you ensure that the people around you are feeling motivated and inspired and feel like they're being taken care of during these times, right? This is, a very unique opportunity, and one opportunity where I think this is where leaders can step up and really dig deep into their own understanding of their emotions so that they can then channel that and figure out how to best support their people.
So much in there. Yeah, go ahead.
It's I'm just like looking at all the people that are kind of tuning into this. This is like a global thing. It's a global pandemic. It's not a USA thing or a South America. Like the entire world is affected by this. And, hopefully the entire world, is really looking at how people are actually feeling during these times, because, we have maybe in New York City where it's like, a big, I'm in Brooklyn. There's, this is, a big center where a lot of people are affected. And I am like a 1 to 2 ratio of degrees of people that I know that are affected by COVID and this time. And really just like the first thing I say to every single person I speak to is, how are you doing? Is your family okay? Really kind of checking in on how they're feeling, and people really kind of loosen up. They feel cared for, they feel looked after. And I think that's so important for us to really look at it on a global scale.
I would just add to that too, that asking how are you and then getting specific is super helpful too. So saying, what's one thing that's challenged you this week, or what's one thing that surprised you? Because I think some days I know how to answer the question, how are you? And some days I do not know how to answer that question.
Yes. I want to get to, there's so many questions that I want to get to, but I just want to highlight out of what you all said that this is a uniquely universal experience right now across the planet. B, it's always important that we're attuned to our own emotions, our impact on others, and how others are doing. But right now, there's all these added stresses that every individual is operating inside of, being socially isolated, and then also everything that's happening in the economy with people's families. Like there's all this extra stress, and then none of the normal things that we have to be able to read body language, give a hug. Like there's just this layers and layers of new stresses and challenges. So Allison is asking a very specific question I want to get to, which is, what is working in your organizations that others can apply to elevate self-awareness and bring, this is an interesting phrase, to bring an openness and personal responsibility about our impact on others versus a self-preservation attitude? So anyone want to jump in on that? Kevin?
I think one thing that popped to mind is just, as a leader, being vulnerable, right? Molly talked about kind of this specificity, and, we were talking about this emotional granularity of, you're not just feeling good or you're feeling bad, but like what exactly you're feeling and like why and how is that kind of showing up in your stress levels at work or, in work itself. And so I think if leaders can model that vulnerability, I think that's one really way where you're being honest and open about how you're feeling. You're not like self-preserving, and you're kind of giving others the license to do the same.
Yeah. And I would add in, Kevin, actually, Latoya, go ahead. I'll let you jump in.
Just a quick tactical thing on that, just to tie in what Kevin just shared. Something specific to what people are doing, some really good advice. I've been speaking to a lot of HR leaders, and what they're doing is they're allowing flexible working hours. And that, if there's certain meetings there, certain meetings that are mandatory happen in the middle of the day and not early in the morning, because a lot of people have families and a lot of people have kids and they have to do the homeschooling. So they have to set their kids up, get them breakfast, get them focused, and they have an opportunity to kind of get down into work. So really creating, there's a couple of rules around like midday meetings, and then also flexible work schedules. So, instead of getting something, between the hours of 9 to 5, you can get something a little bit later or maybe earlier in the morning, the next day, just to kind of give people an opportunity to kind of pace themselves. Because, as much as some of us love to work from home, a lot of companies do allow that work from home privilege, but there's a lot of people in the workforce that have never worked from home before. And this is and there are people that have like setups in their kitchen, on their dining room table, or in their bedroom, or maybe I've heard even in the car. So, it's really just allowing some flexibility for companies to be able to do work where they can, so people can feel really comfortable. And sorry, go ahead.
No, that's okay. That was really great and helpful. And I do want to call out one thing, and I think it's answering the question as well, but Jessica Legman, and sorry, Jessica, if I butchered your last name, I think she said this is an opportunity for where we're seeing humanity come back into the forefront of everything we do. And it's been plussed in the comments, which I think, it's just a beautiful thing that we're seeing right now. But I think with that comes is this reality, and that leaders and managers of organizations are human too. And I think sometimes we forget that while, it is their job, and I think this great responsibility that we're given as managers of people and leaders of people, that this extra burden that we take on. But I do think right now is the opportunity to, as Kevin said, be vulnerable, to share with people how you're doing, so that maybe that can help them, expand their language around their emotions and what's happening in their space. And I think that opens the door at this time without an additional burden, right? And so I would say, like, to give yourself grace to know that people actually do want to hear from you and how you're doing, because I think it then gives them that ability to say, oh, it's okay for me to feel this way during work, or it's okay, as LaToya said, for me to need this extra time because I need to take care of a family member or a child, or I just need to go for a jog like Meredith did this morning, right? Like, I think those are, I think we're just giving people more grace, but I think having that vulnerability is so important.
We have, just to add, one tactical thing, we have mental health days. I know a lot of companies have those, but I think especially now it's important to like highlight those, bring those up. We've definitely in our company have been seeing those being more utilized.
Yeah, I'm so happy you brought that up, Kevin, especially just to connect some dots about leaders being vulnerable, also leaders using those days. Because people are reticent to use them if it's not modeled by people in leadership. So it's really powerful, Kevin, to have you as a founder talk about the value of that. Lynette, I want to go back to something that you said, but with direct the question to you, Molly, and that is about people feeling their feelings. Because it's one thing to be vulnerable about talking about them, but there's this step in between, which is even noticing you're having them and experiencing them. So Molly, thoughts on, any thoughts anywhere you want to take that question?
Sure. So I think we all have been experiencing more intense and more what we traditionally call negative emotions of late. So anxiety, frustration, anger. And I think we have been taught in a professional setting that those are not appropriate. And so we got to pretend like they don't exist. Well, they do exist. We're still humans. We still have them. And so by trying to not recognize them, that makes it even worse when they come out in unfortunate ways, like getting really angry all of a sudden during a Zoom call. So I do think, and this is again something that leaders can model, which is really like lengthening that stretch between I'm having an emotion and then what am I going to do about it? And taking that time to really get granular and say, I am feeling really frustrated. Why am I feeling frustrated? Let me get to the point where I can get really specific about what that is, and then articulate that in a way that is vulnerable, but selectively vulnerable. So, okay, I'm feeling a lot of anxiety about what it's going to be like to return to work. Let me express that to my team as a leader and say, I too am worried about coming to work. But here's what we are going to do in order to make sure that we figure it out and we're taking the steps. So it's acknowledging that, and it's creating this path forward, which is super important. But by creating the space for it, you let others create the space for it. So a great example that I heard from a founder was saying, I have experienced a lot of anxiety in the past few weeks, just like all of you. And I'm trying to figure it out just like all of you. I have faith that together we will make it through this time. But everyone just felt so relieved that he said that and was able to articulate it.
Kevin, Lynette, or Latoya, anything else to add to what Molly said about noticing one's emotions, experiencing them, sharing about them responsibly?
Yeah, I think the key to, and I really appreciate, you kind of like teasing that out first, Molly, because there's one thing that comes to mind for me is when you're thinking about emotional intelligence and as a leader in the workforce or in whatever space that you're in, really having a good grasp on checking in on how are you feeling, right? And like, there needs to be some type of mantra or something in the morning or whatever it is to kind of like really check your temperature. And it's not about like you're really great or you're balanced or you're not, but just really just because we're human too, like Kevin mentioned, it's really just making sure that you have a really good scope on how you can handle the day. So when people interact with you and you're checking in on their day and how they're doing, it comes up very authentic. You can relate, you can build more rapport, and you can connect, because my day goes like this. So, and I catch people on those things. And I think it really grows that. And I know that I was looking at the Zoom chats, and people are wondering like, what is Mental Health Day, or what does that look like? Well, shout out to May. It's Mental Health Awareness Month. So this is a very timely topic. And really, mental health days are for people that have like any type of stress or anxiety, and they really just can't deal, and they just need a day just to kind of rest, be in their own space. Some people go to like different doctor's appointments. Some people have really intense therapies where it happens at a certain date and they really need to take the rest of the day off to kind of process what's happening. So mental health days are really used for those types of things. It's very different from a typical doctor's visit, and it's very, very helpful for people.
Yeah. Yeah,
Oh,
and I would just add that one of to Kevin's earlier point, not only just the mental health days, but also the resources that we have, right? So a lot of the conversations, even from the messages that we get from senior leaders when they're either doing their weekly calls or weekly voicemails that they leave the organization, is around just every resource that we have available right now. Our wellness team has been doing an incredible job staying on top of sending out communication, making sure everyone feels as though they have all of the resources necessary. Their response time has been faster than I've ever seen it since joining the company. And I think people are really aware that people need more support and resources. And so just connecting with your wellness teams and making sure that those programs exist for people, I think is really important.
Yeah, I think also what they do is, for us, right, we're a startup. So when people are out taking their mental health day, they put mental health day. And I think what it does, it could be, for things like therapy and treatment. And it also just to get outside, right? I think what it does is it destigmatizes mental health, because that's been a really big issue. But I think, destigmatizing it is becoming more adopted and accepted, so to speak.
Totally. Something I hear in this conversation, both in the chat and in the live conversation, is destigmatizing and then even prioritizing mental health. Like, it's not only something bad to be embarrassed about, it's something to like you go get your blood taken to make sure you have like the right, nothing's like out of whack and you're making sure to take care of your physical health, but like really focusing on and prioritizing one's mental health and encouraging and supporting that as leaders and modeling it. Did I cut any of you off? And Molly, it looked like you wanted to.
Yeah, one general thing that I've seen work well within organizations around destigmatizing things and giving permission for things is to create something called an It's Okay To list. So this actually came out of the UK Government Digital Service did this before COVID, and they had this poster that they put up on the wall that's like, it's okay to have a messy desk. It's okay to take a walk during lunch. It's okay to not know all the answers. It's okay to sigh, like all these things. And I have seen organizations do this in a COVID context as well, where it's like, yeah, it's okay to work 8 hours, but not from 9 to 5. It's okay to take a mental health day. It's okay to not know how you're doing. And it's a really interesting collective exercise to do as an organization, like to surface these things and have a conversation about it. Very powerful. Highly recommend.
So much. All right. Well, we have this question that came in from Emily, that if anybody wants to add anything based on this question, it's related, but Emily is asking, how do you embed personal growth and self-regulation?
Well, one of the things that I think it's helpful for organizations to do is to create space for that. So I think personal growth happens through reflection and feedback and setting goals. And so often we only get these during like our official review times or one-on-one times, and that sort of thing. And I think trying to put time on the calendar for that with your team or one-on-one with someone you work with, either on a monthly basis, a quarterly basis, beginning and end and middle of projects, like whatever makes sense for your workflow. And then taking the time to ask those questions about what's been challenging for you, what's one thing that you're going to try, what's one thing you want to reflect on. Like, I think we all mean to do these things, but if we don't actually put time for them on the calendar, they don't happen.
Yeah, and I would just add there being really inclusive around how we're asking for feedback, right? I think some people don't feel as comfortable giving feedback in a one-on-one setting directly to their manager. So having different forums to give feedback, I think, is really important. To Molly's point around how are you embedding this personal growth piece into your everyday behaviors. I would also say, how you are authentic about what those areas of growth are for you, and how you ensure that everyone on your team is part of creating that action plan for your growth, right? Because I think, again, we always think about, well, what is it that I need to do? But also, what do you need to do for the other people around you? I think is really important to think about. So I think those are two just like very actionable things that you can do is one, find a forum, work with your HR team to find a forum where you can get feedback anonymously if that's helpful for your team. But I also think setting up time to do that, as Molly mentioned, is extremely important.
Yeah, and I want to tease out, the concept around, feedback not being so much of a shock value for people. Just to be very honest, like I am sometimes afraid when I get like someone says to you, I have some feedback to give you, and I'm just like, holy crap, and then you're like checking all your vitals because it's just coming out, and you're just like, your heart is like racing, and and that's a very natural human reaction. So I think the best way to kind of really facilitate that is, I want to talk you through some opportunities. And when you get feedback from someone or anyone sharing feedback to you, whether it's you agree with it or you disagree with it or whatever in the middle, feedback really is someone's really letting you know what they need from you and what they want, what they expect. That's what really feedback is. Whether it's your behavior or not your behavior, it just gives you really deep insight of what this person really values. And that's what you really want to hear. So it's really just understanding that they're going to be giving you a nugget to bring a relationship much closer so you can really value and then maybe make a change or have a conversation around it. I know I reveal a lot about my emotions around feelings, but about feedback, but that's really a very natural response to it. And I really appreciate Lynette's like different channels of it so people can get feedback the way they need to get it so they can be more effective as opposed to being defensive.
When talking about feedback, one of the things that I do, and I first ask like, hey, like given a certain subject, hey, what do you think you're doing well? So it kind of brings out that awareness of what they're doing well, what they shouldn't be continuing to do. And then like, what do they think they can improve on? And so it gives them the opportunity to kind of, sometimes have like that forced reflection of like, okay, well, what can I actually improve on? Instead of just moving to the next task or project. And then I kind of layer in, what I think they're doing well and what I think they can improve on. It could be the same, it could be different, but they're generally good conversations to see like kind of what plane people are on.
And, I've been hearing a lot lately from people who are asking about their performance during this time. And I think to LaToya's point, we have a really unique opportunity to continue to drive this culture around giving feedback, because we don't want people to be surprised, right? And I think that is probably the worst element of leadership in my mind, is surprising people with information, especially during a performance review that they're not aware of. And so one tactic that I've tried historically in roles that I've had is, always asking people, to Kevin's point, what is it that you're doing well? If you were to rate yourself this cycle, like what would that be and why, right? Like talk me through where your performance is as it relates to the attributes that we have, right? So really, I think having this conversation, which I think is a great opportunity to give feedback as well. I think, again, performance is something that people definitely are asking questions about. How is this pandemic going to impact my performance overall? So having these conversations ahead of time, I think is going to be really important for people.
I have also noticed organizations shying away from continuing to do the normal ways of giving feedback, because it feels more awkward to give feedback via Zoom or Slack or email or however you're going to do it. And I think it is just building a new muscle for it. It's like we can't just put that on pause. And so finding ways in your organization to ease into it, like, okay, we're going to practice it together, or here's some phrases that you can use that make it a little bit easier. I also think that the majority of the sort of what day-to-day feedback happens between meetings. It's like, you did a great job with that in the hallway, or like, hey, good job with that. Watch out for this next time. And we're missing that because we don't have those in between times. And so making it a practice to, at the end of the day, think back and say, can I give one person that quick feedback today that I would have done in person?
Yeah, I think one thing that made me think about, just on the topic of emotional intelligence, this is where it matters the most, right? When you are giving feedback to someone, it's not business as usual. During this time when people's life completely has changed, it's really to kind of really tune in and be fully self-aware of what you're trying to say and what you're trying to get across. And I was on a panel or talk maybe a couple of weeks ago, and one thing that stood out to me on that came out of that conversation was giving feedback either on a Zoom or a video call versus on a phone. People are now switching, using a cell phone or a telephone to have these types of conversation, because all of your senses are really focused on, the actual telephone call in itself. You can close your eyes, you can listen, you can process, you can breathe. If you have a reaction, you don't have to worry about masking it. You can be like, and no one can see, so I think it's really interesting to kind of think about it that way.
So much in there. I just want to highlight a couple of things that I heard that could get dropped along the way. So one is in the chat. I saw Amanda said something about, in response to what you said, LaToya, earlier in the conversation, noticing the difference between growth mindset and fixed mindset. And I think that's a really interesting question right now, how we have ourselves in growth mindset and how we help the people inside the organization be in a growth mindset at a time that people feel psychological threat, physical threat, social isolation. Like, growth mindset is a thing that really takes something. And just thoughts from any of you on how to encourage or support growth mindset during a time like this.
So I think we're all being forced into a growth mindset. Like, I think it's almost like taking a step back and reframing it for folks of like, I understand you had, maybe 5 goals that you were going to work on this year, but ultimately what we're all working on this year are new skills of how do we work from home? How do we motivate ourselves when we are not around our colleagues? And so I think there's a conversation to be had of like, let's give ourselves credit for a lot of the growth that we're doing that maybe we're not thinking about as growth, and that we are all building new muscles. A lot of that have come up on this conversation of, giving feedback in new ways. And I think it's really important for managers to recognize that and point out, you're actually doing an incredible job being flexible and embracing ambiguity, and like a lot of these skills that don't come up normally in our day-to-day. Sure, maybe you haven't learned this one specific skill, but giving people credit for that.
Yes, Molly, it's the second time that you have highlighted, and I just want to highlight it again, the credit and positive feedback, and how much the filling of the bank account creates spaciousness to take in more. Not like, obviously not fake credit, but like real acknowledgement and appreciation, so people have that internal resilience. Anything else any of you want to say about growth mindset?
No, I mean, I think Molly hit it spot on, but I also do think, to reiterate, more now than ever, I think it's important to recognize those little nuggets that people are doing. And even thinking about, again, taking yourself out of it. Like, I'll give you all a really great example. Yesterday, I was completely depleted. I was exhausted, but I had someone on my team who executed this incredible event. And I picked up the phone, even though I was incredibly exhausted, to say, thank you. Here's what I saw you do well. We had one technical glitch, and I'm like, we're going to have technical glitch. It's technology. It's going to happen, right? But I think recognizing people and figuring out how to encourage people, even through these challenges, that even when something goes wrong and what they can learn from them. I think that is, even in this growth mindset model right now, is just encouraging people even more than we have before.
Yeah, and I want to add, Kevin, you can do some snaps?
Oh, I'm just doing snaps. I'm just loving it. Yes.
What I love so much about Carol Dweck and her work, and also the concept of growth mindset, is that she, did her early studies of really understanding it through children. Like, she worked with kids and see how adaptable they are and how they received feedback and how they took on new things and learned new things. So for all the parents that are out there that fortunately have children at home, they're your leaders now. And I'm sure many of them have adapted to this new normal very well, because children are early adopters of most things. Hello, millennials out there. And, really look to them as leaders in your household and what it means to kind of really transform and change and develop a growth mindset, and be able to do that. So really think through it like that. It's a really cute, fun way to live your life through your children.
Yeah, I love the, just when people are talking about appreciation and acknowledgement, I think everyone, and it could be different days, are either powering through or like trudging through this time to like get work done, and just simply kind of calling out and just thanking them means a lot. I had a teammate who, basically called me out, and I think sometimes as leaders, like, you don't get as much of like kind of the bottoms up like acknowledgement. It just felt really good. It motivated me, it energized me, and I think like, that kind of goes like all ways, right? Appreciation can be really energizing.
There's something that's really standing out to me from things through this entire conversation around how do I want to say this? Normalizing our humanity by having leaders check in with themselves, give credit to others, having the it's okay list. And then the thing that really stood out to me is that made me think that, Kevin, is when you just said not powering through or trudging through, because I think, at least by my observations, maybe you're seeing something different, but there has been a normalization of trudging through, where people are just like, yes, you have to power through. And what I heard in what you said, Kevin, and really all of you, is that there's like a different way to work right now that doesn't have to be trudging through or powering through, but it requires something different from leaders as it relates to themselves and how they lead their teams. So, Lynette?
Yeah, I was going to say, look, I think a lot of companies before this pandemic said everyone has to work from the office. We can't have people working from home. And overnight, right? We had this completely different mindset and viewpoint on how people can remotely work and still be productive, right? And so I think getting back to Kevin's point, you know, powering through and trudging through, I think is the narrative of, I'd like to say, before pandemic, right? And I think now what we are seeing is that we actually don't have to power or trudge through. Yes, we have to get things done. Yes, we're working for clients, and yes, we're trying to be productive, but there are also moments where we're gonna have to figure out how to allow people to feel and get into the moment when they need to be in that moment, right? And so I've been giving people a lot of grace and just ownership over their own emotions. And so, you know, we were talking a little bit on the pre-call about, you know, I ask people, you know, what is top of mind for you today? Because at the beginning of a work call, if what's top of mind for you or a check-in is that my parents are sick or I have a sick child, then what's top of mind for you is not going to be this report that I need you to get out or this analysis that I need done, right? And so that allows me to have this different grace to Kevin's point about, so maybe this call is not for me to ask you to do something. Maybe this call is for me to listen. Maybe this call is for me to be your cheerleader, to support you, to provide you resources. And so I think really figuring out how to navigate that in this new environment is our new normal, right? Because I really do think that we have to kind of shift this entire narrative. So I'll pause there because I could go on a tangent about this, but I think we've definitely come to a point where we can kind of flip the game here.
Lynette, I think you brought up something for me, which I'm just sort of processing now, which is, I think in an office context, it very much is like, this is the way we do work, and you're going to follow the way that like our society has set up to do work. And now that all has been broken open. And so really all that leaders can do is help their employees figure out how to best do work for themselves. Like, and that's a very different thing. It is that like, I need to help you be introspective, because what works best for you at home may not work best for someone else at home. And you have to do the work to identify, you know, am I procrastinating? How do I stop procrastinating? Am I working too much? How do I stop working too much? Whereas before it was just like, come into the office, work 9 to 5, like this is what we know works. And it's just such a different mindset. It's very much a coaching, a mentorship, an introspective mindset that leaders have to get their workers to shift into, because the only way to be successful is for you to figure out what works for me as an individual. It's like, if there's one thing that you have to do is figure that out, and leaders have to support that journey.
Absolutely. And you know, another thing that this just made me think of is, you know, we have been talking a lot about productivity. And one thing that I challenge everyone to think about is, how do you measure productivity at your company? And how do you think about equipping people with the right tools that they need to be as productive as possible with this new kind of normalcy that we're in, and knowing that it could be extended for a while longer, right? And so I think understanding that, and then, you know, coupling it with, how do we make sure that we're showing up for people in the way that they need, I think is again, helping to teach us and push this emotional intelligence piece that hopefully all leaders are going to continue to work on, even when we're back in the office space. So I think this is even setting us up to be more productive as leaders with what we're trying to face right now.
And I think thinking about, even I'm looking at someone who's like a Kevin, who's a business leader, and like, how do you really streamline the, you know, your organization? So like, what are the key priorities? What, you know, what do we know for sure? What do we not a priority anymore? And like, here are the simple things that you can, so because people want to come to work feeling like they're accomplishing something and they're doing something. And, you know, it may be a couple of weeks kind of like flapping their, you know, their arms a little bit, but when you get back to work, you really want to be able to say, I am moving the needle across, because, you know, this business is still fighting to be alive. This business is still fighting to provide services for clients. This business is still trying to do things to keep the light on. And I want to make sure that I'm super productive in whatever role that I'm in to get stuff done. So getting really clear, simple goals, you know, maybe it's a monthly thing, or maybe it's somewhat of, I like this concept that, you know, we do like these sprints every now and then, quarterly sprints or monthly sprints. And also, we have to also address the anxiety that people are having, because these waves of layoffs are death by 1,000 cuts, right? You know, and, you know, most times in my experience doing workforce planning, it's a time and moment. you do it, it happens, and then you say, everybody, you're safe and everything is fine, and let's move on with the company. But the businesses are being kind of thrown left and right, and they are like, you know, they're like series of waves that are happening. So you're at home, you know, kind of looking behind, you know, close, like, am I going to be next? So being productive and having goals is so important for people to have, so you can feel like they're useful and they're valuable and they're getting stuff done.
So good. All right. I want to just first call out the amazing work that's happening in the chat. For anybody who's just listening, tune into the chat too, because the panelists and this incredible community are sharing amazing resources, ideas, things other people are doing. So just thank you so much for everybody in this community, for everything you're sharing. You're so generous. And then LaToya, to jump off of what you just said, I want to ask how any of you panelists are seeing the integration of that businesses, some businesses are fighting for their lives. And it's not business as usual, not just for the individual humans, but for the businesses. Some businesses are fighting for their lives. And then we're talking about, and we want to prioritize people's mental health, people feeling good and not pushing through, having goals. So thoughts from any of you on integrating those two concepts when they could look in opposition to one another?
I think it's
Go ahead, Molly.
I think it's naming exactly what you just said. And I think it's saying both, we have to keep this business afloat. And that can actually be a really good motivating driving force of like, we all want to keep our jobs, we all need to work hard, and it feels like in this moment of like, unless you're a frontline worker, you know, how can I possibly have a purpose in this world? But that is a real purpose. So calling that out as a real purpose, at the same time saying, we as an organization are going to support you to do the best work that you can given your situation, and here's what that is going to look like. So it's not that, you know, you can't have a mental health day because we have to work 80 hours a week to keep the business afloat, but it's like we need to work smart to keep the business afloat and not let off. But also we are in this for the long run, and we need to support you as people in the long run.
That's so good. Like the marathon versus the sprint and what it takes to succeed at the marathon. Lynette, I know you were going to say something.
Yeah, I mean, I think Molly hit it spot on. I mean, I think communication is key, right? And I think we would be remiss if we didn't, you know, talk about the realities of what people are facing right now. And that some people, you know, don't have the luxury to say, oh, I'm going to take the whole middle of the day off, because maybe that's a point where they need to go find clients. They need to make sure that they're making those calls, right? And I think the reality is that as leaders, we have to call that out and be very clear about what we are trying, the goals we are trying to reach, but then also giving people the grace to know that in this time, if you need to lean on someone else, here's how we do that, right? Like the it's okay list. Like this would be a great opportunity if a company is facing this, is to talk about what is the it's okay list right now in this reality, and then really talking about what's on the other side of that, right? I think having that communication is in letting people see what there is to look forward to, maybe after this tumultuous time. I think that can give people also kind of this rainbow or ray of light that they can see at the end of the tunnel. But communication is key, prioritizing is key, and then giving people, and then continuing to give people recognition, right? When they're working super hard, they're working those long hours. Those things I think can continue to drive and motivate people and inspire people to work even harder if necessary.
And speaking of, oh, Kevin, you're going to say something?
Yeah. It was just, you know, it kind of brought up, you know, I think at least in our business, some teams are feeling incredibly overwhelmed, and then other teams are lighter because business is not, it's not as busy coming through. And so people have been kind of shifting their time and energy to like help out teams that are more busy. And so I think when you kind of like have that like altruism, and you can be open about your time of like, hey, like I want to, you know, I'm free, like how can I help? It almost kind of like spreads the effort and burden kind of required. So yeah, that's been really helpful for us. Something small and tactical.
Love that, Kevin. And back to you, LaToya.
Yeah, I wanted to add in, I just had a moment of thinking of like, most of us work in technology, most of us work in banking in like large companies. And I'm thinking about, some of the people that are on the call, around the world that we never want to forget, obviously. I just realized that today kicks off Nurses Week in America. So we're recognizing, and Lynette, you kind of popped it in my head of recognizing nurses who don't have the luxury of having all of these benefits that we've described, but really are out there getting support, and we're rallying behind them. And then all of the other workers that keep the cities keep going, like, that we don't really hear of. The sanitation department, my garbage still gets picked up every single week. All of these different things that people are out there every single day, really keeping the city going, just like the basic needs of countries to survive. So, you really have to kind of think about, I think perspective is so important during these times. And in some of our companies, we need to really share that perspective of what it means to really fight to keep this organization going and providing value to customers, to really understanding there are people that are out there really fighting for their lives, and there are people behind them supporting them fighting for their lives. And part of that is really making sure that we all do our parts and understanding like our values and what we do every single day at work.
I really appreciate the focus, bringing it back to people's basic needs. And included in our basic needs are being inspired and having something to look forward to and feeling progress. And that as leaders, it's a responsibility to create that for people, like the rallying force that's not just the trudge through, but creating that inspiration even in a hard time. As we're coming in on our final minutes together, Lily is asking if there was just one thing you would advise leaders to take away from this and act upon, what would it be? So Lynette, let's start with you.
Oh, wow. I mean, for leaders, one, I would say just check in on yourself, or find that executive council that you have, whether it be friends, colleagues, check in on yourself, figure out how you're doing. I think the root of being able to help others is being able to help yourself and understand your needs. So one, just check in on yourself, make a quick note. Every morning I try to jot down a quick note about like what is rummaging through my mind, so that one, I can clear it out so that I can be present for other people. But two, I can know then how I'm going to show up, what my energy is going to be like for the day. And then the other thing I would say is find a way that's authentic to you to show up for someone that you haven't shown up to yet, right? So think about maybe a mentee that you haven't reached out to. Maybe think about a colleague that you've been wanting to catch up with. Maybe it's a friend, maybe it's a family member. Just think about a way that you can show up. And I think that will then give you ideas and inspiration for how you can show up to work.
So good. And I love the virtuous circle of that kind of generosity, that it supports others, but it's so self-nourishing. Like we're doing better after we do that kind of reach out. So thank you so much, Lynette. You pass it around, Lynette. Who?
Sure. Why don't we go to Kevin?
Lynette, I know you said so many good things. I think, just to make it different, I think when somebody checks in with you, acknowledge and kind of, if you appreciate it, like acknowledge and appreciate it, is be like, hey, thanks for giving me that space. Like I needed that. Right? That feels good to them, and they're going to do it more to other people. And hopefully you do that, and it is that virtuous cycle where you check in and give people space. It's yeah.
So good. Kevin, you can pass it around too.
LaToya.
Yes. I always like to go the sentiment route, because I think it's just so important. And there are two tactical things I think that our leaders can do for companies and really should think about is, if you have a fairly large department, you should take you and your direct reports, and you should divide up the emails or phone calls or whatever, and reach out to people or text people. Like literally, like spend at least a whole day on focusing on your people, and just like sending them either a text message or do a 30-second call just to see how they're doing, and divide. Notice lots of leads that have like 500, 5,000 people underneath them, but really figure out ways to really connect with your people. Sending mass emails help, and it gives them information, but making it personalized and like show that you care, that's important. Or you can set up small like Zoom meetings for them to do. Something that was really touching that I saw a company that I used to work for a couple of companies ago, shout out to LivePerson, the CEO, most CEOs know famous people. I'm just gonna put that out there. They're just like, I guess all of a sudden being a CEO is cool. And my CEO, my former CEO, he had, I believe it was one of the band members from Peter, Paul, and Peter, Mary, Paul, and Peter, who sings the song Puff the Magic Dragon. He had him come up, that one of the, I think it was Peter, joined the call as a surprise and played a guitar and sang Puff the Magic Dragon. It was, and I saw the video on his Instagram and everybody's like crying. So if you know anyone that's, or can play an instrument, to really just sing to your people or speak with them in some kind of way, please do that. I think it's just a heartwarming and amazing thing for someone to do, a leader to do for people.
I feel that in my whole body, Latoya. I could use that myself. Like, it's just such a good idea. I love it. All right, and you pass it around.
Molly, wonderful Molly.
Thank you all. I agree with everything. So I saw this come up in the chat too, which is like, but what if you're not a leader? And I just want to touch on that too. So I think first, as a leader, creating space for others to create suggestions. So saying, you know, I don't have this all figured out. If you have ideas of other things we can do remotely or other practices we should adopt, let's try that. I think we all need to be in a trying mindset. So the things that worked for communication in the past are not as good now. And so a lot of this is like trying new ways, seeing what works, being willing to fail and iterate. And then as a individual contributor, not being afraid to suggest that. So I guarantee that, you know, and Kevin can weigh in on this, like if an individual contributor went to a leader right now and said, I have a great way that I think our team can stay connected, it's like, great, please try that. Like, you know, most of leaders are really overwhelmed and are sort of struggling with what would work. And I think are going to be more open than maybe in the past to trying new things. And, you know, Donut has been mentioned a couple times. Like that's something that we've been using within our organization that I just suggested as a way for people to get coffee chats. And it was like, great, try that. It's been working really well. You know, the It's Okay To list. I was like, let's try this. So things that you, that maybe you're scared of, I would push back against that fear and suggest.
Ooh, so much good stuff. I'm going to highlight a few things that really stood out to me. So humanity is front and center for us, both the ways that we don't get to experience our connection to humanity and being present to, like we don't get to experience the physical part and then being present to our own humanity in altogether new ways. Some takeaways that I'm taking for myself are check-ins, both for ourselves daily. I thought that was so powerful, and for all leaders, or maybe all people. And then checking in on others. And if your team's too big, separating the list. That mass emails are one thing, but really having that human to human check-in and creating grace that it's okay wherever people are at, and giving permission for people to be where they are. Recognizing and appreciating the beautiful things people are doing, giving credit, recognizing that this experience is a marathon, not a sprint, and that yes, even when even when the business is fighting for results and staying viable, that taking care of the people and having people have the mental health days and the space to be okay and free and experiencing life in a productive way is how we make it through that marathon. Creating shared experiences that are generous and inspiring, like Puff the Magic Dragon, and being willing to try things and fail. So to this incredible group of panelists, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and experiences and insights. And to this incredible off the hook community in the chat, thank you so much for your ideas, resources, insights. Go make your version of this real in the world. And thank you. The SHRM code is going to be in the chat if you need that. And just appreciate all of you so much. Bye for now.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.